Good evening. Tonight, I'm going to be celebrating the phenomenal body of work by Hilary Mantel and also discussing her profound influence and effect on both readers and writers. The past is so close and yet irretrievable, said Hilary Mantel. Listening to her talking about history is different to listening to anyone else talking about history. She seems to live in history in a way that other people don't understand. She said, history is the element we move through, but like fish, we are not aware of it. When you read Hilary Mantel's incredible novels, you feel as if you are literally there, partly because she wrote in the present tense in these books anyway, but also because she seemed to actually live and breathe the characters and the past that she was discussing. And all of her books are phenomenal pieces of writing. I'm going to be sharing some of those books with you this evening and also sharing some of other authors' thoughts on books and some of the amazing experiences that authors and readers have had through reading Hilary Mantel's books. And I'd like to start with a story from Michael Holden, who is an author himself, who, after Hilary Mantel very sadly died on September the 22nd, tweeted a thread about his own personal experience about how Hilary Mantel saved him from a mental and physical prison. There were lots of incredible tweets and stories that came out in very many different forums when Hilary Mantel died. But Michael Holden's was one that particularly stood out to me because it was incredibly powerful and it was all about the power of writing and how incredibly effective this is in moments when you least expect it. And I did, after seeing Michael's tweet, get in touch with him. So I've got his permission very kindly to talk about this story that he told on Twitter. So Michael Holden is a journalist, screenwriter, columnist, and writer of books, some of which for which he is not credited for various reasons. He wrote this very powerful thread on Twitter about the way that Hilary Mantel profoundly affected him. And I'd like to share this with you now. So I am going to read you the thread on Twitter that you can also find and then elucidate it a little bit more. So he started off by saying, I want to share something about Hilary Mantel, which I hope is about her as a writer, but also perhaps an illustration of the power and potential of writing itself. He starts off by saying, 5 years ago, I was sectioned for the first time in over 20 years. Insofar as I was thinking, I thought, this is it, you're finished. There will never be any escape from this, and these unbearable feelings will be with you for the rest of your life. Eventually, I got out of bed and made my way to the ward's common room. There were only half a dozen books in there, one of which was Wolf Hall. I didn't imagine I could concentrate, but I needed to get away from what was happening in my head, so I started to read it. It was a struggle. Less than 24 hours earlier, I had been sufficiently psychotic to get handcuffed and brought here, but there was something in the writing and enough left of the writer in me that could appreciate what she had done on these pages. Partly because I could see that this was way past anything I could have written, my mind kind of slowly snapped into a kind of flickering but reverent focus that took my attention away from itself and allowed some kind of background repair to begin. And I spoke to Michael about this today, that idea of the background repair that was going on in his brain because of the writing that he was reading in a book by Hilary Mantel, Wolf Hall, a book that he had never previously read, and which happened to be one of the 6 novels that was to be found in the place where he was sectioned. Now, someone is saying on Facebook that the transmission is stalling. I do apologise for that, and I hope it improves. If you are having trouble on Facebook, then come over to Instagram if you can, because I think the transmission is better there. Do let me know if not. So I'm just reading this thread for people that are joining now from Michael Holden that he wrote on Twitter about the way that Hilary Mantel gave him an amazing escape from the situation that he was in when he was sectioned 5 years ago. So he says, then I came to this section in which Cardinal Wolsey's house is being ransacked, his possessions looted as he is taken to the Tower. So Michael puts in a picture on his Twitter thread of the page, which was the one which in a way saved his life. And I can share with you that it's this one, page 49 here, in Wolf Hall. And I will just read you that section so that you can share it with me. And I've just seen a message on Instagram from Nat saying Hilary Mantel is the only death of a writer who I've cried about. I think a lot of people felt the same way, Nat, and we are all deeply affected by her passing, which is obviously horribly early. She was only 70, born in 1952. So I'm just going to read to you this wonderful section from Wolf Hall, which was the section that Michael Holden ended up learning off by heart, and in a way it saved his life, or it saved his brain, it saved his soul. So this is the bit that he put on Twitter. They take down the tapestries and leave the bare blank walls. They are rolled up, the woolen monarchs, Solomon and Sheba, as they are brought into coiled proximity. Their eyes are filled by each other, and their tiny lungs breathe in the fibre of bellies and thighs. Down came the cardinal's hunting scenes, the scenes of secular pleasure, the sportive peasants splashing in ponds, the stags at bay, the hounds in cry, the spaniels held on leashes of silk, and the mastiffs with their collars of spikes, the huntsmen with their studded belts and knives, the ladies on horseback with jaunty caps, the rush-fringed pond, the mild sheep at pasture, and the bluish-feathered treetops running away into a long-planned distance to a scene of chalky bluffs and a white sailing sky. The cardinal looks at the scavengers as they go about their work. Have we refreshments for our visitors? So I'm now going to carry on with the thread from Michael Holden that he was writing about on Twitter about how he was sectioned 5 years ago and happened to come across a copy of Wolf Hall in the library of the hospital where he was, and then was saved by reading Wolf Hall. He says, I forget now and don't have a copy here, but I think that tapestry detail is set up earlier and then paid off here as the figures are brought into coiled proximity. And the luminous nature of that, the structure and the execution, just took me somewhere else entirely. I was in and out of consciousness, trying to shake off the drugs I'd been given for the next 48 hours. But I took the book to my room and read that page again and again, each time coming a little more close. I've just lost that thread for a minute, but I'm going to carry on the next tweet. By Monday morning, I knew that passage by heart. When I saw a doctor, I could hear those words behind me, almost curating my own, as I made the case for my release. They let me go there and then. I've not been back since. So, It seems right that as an acknowledgement of what Hilary Mantel did for me that weekend and what writing, art, and ideas can do for us all forever, and at any time, that I should share this now as she's departed, and all those pages and possibilities she created live on. So that, thanks to Michael, is an incredibly powerful demonstration of the power of bibliotherapy. That story, for people who've only just joined, is to be found on Twitter. If you look up Michael Holden, you'll find it. And in a nutshell, he was sectioned 5 years ago. He thought that everything was over for him. But then he went to the library, started reading Wolf Hall, and was effectively transformed by it, because he was taken to a place where he could believe in his imagination in another place, another world, something beautiful, something full of art and possibility. And therefore, he was able to imagine another life, imagine continuing living, and imagine being able to use his brain again, even though he was being drugged. He said to me that when he read that book, Wolf Hall, after being sectioned, that it was like having a physical visitor in his hospital. When he read that book, he felt as if a real person had come and visited him. Such was the power of the book. And he also said to me that he since hasn't read beyond that page, or I think you might have read a bit more, but not a lot more, because the very reason its medicinal power is so great that I need to ration it. So the medicinal power of the words of Hilary Mantel is so great that this author, Michael Holden, needed to ration how much he read of the book. And when he goes back to it, he knows that every time he reads it, it will have this incredibly profound effect on him. So I just love that story as an example of the way that a book can have such an incredibly profound effect on a reader, that it can literally save them from a place where they may never have escaped, a place where their mind had almost completely disappeared. And that's Hilary Mantel that did it. So there's a couple of other brilliant reflections by other authors that I want to share with you. But before I do that, I will just give you a little bit of a synopsis of the life of Hilary Mantel. So here we have a bit of a biography for people that don't know about her life. So Hilary Mary Thompson, as she then was born in Glossop, Derbyshire in 1952. Eldest of three children, raised as a Roman Catholic. She went to a Roman Catholic primary school. Her parents were of Irish descent, but were born in England. And her parents separated, and she didn't see her father after the age of 11. So she then grew up with just her mum until Jack Mantel, who moved in with them soon after she was 11, and she took his name legally at that point. She went to a convent school in Cheshire and then began her studies at LSE in London to read law. She transferred to the University of Sheffield and graduated as a Bachelor of Jurisprudence in 1973. She then worked in the social work department of a geriatric hospital as a sales assistant and at Kendall's department store. And many of these experiences, of course, come into her books. And particularly, we can find out a lot of the information about her life in her amazing and brilliant memoir, Giving Up the Ghost, which I'm going to be reading bits from shortly, because that's one of my favourite of her books. Hilary Mantel writes amazingly brilliantly about ghosts, and anyone that's read Giving Up the Ghost or Beyond Black will certainly feel that Hilary Mantel will be in some way present, because the ghosts that she writes about are incredibly tangible. In 1973, she married Gerald McEwen, a geologist, and she then started writing her first novel in 1974, which was about the French Revolution. But she couldn't at that point find a publisher for it, and her first published novel was Every Day is Mother's Day, which wasn't published until 1985, and then a sequel, Vacant Possession. Every Day is Mother's Day is about a young girl of 15 who gets pregnant and becomes a mother early, and then there's a sequel, Vacant Possession, after that. She became the film critic of The Spectator, which a lot of people don't know about her, that not only was she an incredible writer of novels, but she was also incredibly knowledgeable about film. Perhaps that's why her Wolf Hall trilogy was so brilliantly adapted to TV. Her third novel, 8 Months on Gazaar Street, I think that's how you pronounce it, it's with a double Z, 1988, drew on her life in Saudi Arabia, because she lived in Saudi Arabia with her husband for 4 years. It features a threatening clash of values between the neighbours in a city apartment block, and explores the tensions between Islamic culture and the liberal West. She then wrote a novel called Flood, which is set in 1956 in a fictitious northern village called Featherhoughton, centering on a Roman Catholic church and a convent. So, all in all, Hilary Mantel has written 12 novels, which include A Place of Greater Safety, which is one about the French Revolution, which did win in 1992 the Sunday Express Book of the Year award, even though when she first wrote it, she couldn't find a publisher for it, which just goes to show, got to keep pushing out those books and not giving up. And that was all about Danton, Robespierre and Camille Desmoulins, and tells the story of their lives until their early deaths during the Reign of Terror in 1794. She also wrote A Change of Climate, set in rural Norfolk, which is set in the present. An Experiment in Love, which was published in 1996, which follows the progress of 3 girls as they leave home and attend university in London. She's dotted around not just historical novels, but quite a few novels that are set in the present. There's another historical one, which is not so well known, The Giant O'Brien, set in the 1780s, based on the true story of Charles O'Brien, who was an enormously tall man, a giant of the times, who came to London to earn money by displaying himself as a freak. And his bones do still hang to this day in the Museum of the Royal College of Surgeons. The novel treats the main characters, O'Brien and his antagonist, the Scotch surgeon John Hunter, less as characters in history than as mythic protagonists in a dark and violent fairy tale. So, as we know from Hilary Mantel's phenomenal work on the Wolf Hall trilogy, all about Thomas Cromwell, she has an incredible knack of getting into the heads and hearts of the people that she's describing. I'm now just going to read you a little bit from her memoir, Giving Up the Ghost, which was published in 2003. So there's still a huge amount of her life that she unfortunately hasn't written about, as far as I'm aware, or there's no later memoir that was published about her life. So we would love to know more, and I'm sure that there will be more that comes out in various ways, because Hilary Mantel did write a lot of phenomenal essays as well in her life. But I just want to read you a bit from Giving Up the Ghost because I love the way she writes about people who are no longer with us. About 11 o'clock, I see a flickering on the staircase. The air is still, then it moves. I raise my head. The air is still again. I know it is my stepfather's ghost coming down. Or to put it in a way acceptable to most people, I know it is my stepfather's ghost. I am not perturbed. I'm used to seeing things that aren't there. Or, to put it in a way more acceptable to me, I'm used to seeing things that aren't there. It was in this house that I last saw my stepfather Jack in the early months of 1995, alive in his garments of human flesh. Many times since then, I have acknowledged him on the stairs. Don't you love that description? Garments of human flesh, which is rather disturbing, but also utterly brilliant. It may, of course, be that the flicker against the banister was nothing more than the warning of a migraine attack. It's at the left-hand side of my body that visions manifest. It's my left eye that is peeled. I don't know whether, at such vulnerable times, I see more than is there, or if things are there that normally I don't see. Over the years, the premonitionary symptoms of migraine headaches have become more than the dangerous puzzle that they were earlier in my life, and more than a warning to take the drugs that might ward off a full-blown attack. They have become a psychic adornment of, or flourish, an art form, a secret talent I have never managed to make money from. Sometimes they take the form of the visual disturbances that are common to many sufferers. Small objects will vanish from my field of vision, and there will be floating lacunae in the world, each shaped rather like a donut with a dazzle of light where the hole should be, which is a particularly memorable phrase. A donut with a dazzle of light where the hole should be. You have to think about that quite hard to imagine it, but you can really picture it flickering around Hilary Mantel's eyes when she's having these strange visions. Sometimes there are flashes of gold against the wall, darting chevrons, like the wings of small, quick angels. Scant sleep and lack of food increase the chances of these sightings. Starving saints in Lent, hypoglycemic and jittery, saw visions to meet their expectations. Sometimes the aura takes more trying forms. I will go deaf. The words I try to write end up as other words. I will suffer strange dreams from which I wake with hallucinations of taste. Once, 30 years ago, I dreamt that I was eating bees, and ever since I have lived with their milk chocolate sweetness and their texture, which is like lightly cooked calf's liver. Isn't that a rather horrible idea? Eating bees, which have a milk chocolate sweetness and a texture of lightly cooked calf's liver. It may be that a tune will lodge in my head like a tick and bring the words tripping in with it, so I am forced to live my life by its accompaniment. It's a familiar complaint to have a tune you can't get out of your head, but for most people, the tunes aren't the prelude to a day of hearty vomiting. Besides, people say they pick them up from the radio, but mine are songs people don't really sing these days. Bill Bailey, would you please come home? For instance. Some talk of Alexander and some of Hercules. My aged father did me deny, and the name he gave me was the croppy boy. Today, the day I see the ghost, the problem's just that my words don't come out right, so I have to be careful at Mr. Ewing's. But he understands me without any trouble, and yes, he remembers selling us the cottage 7 years ago. Now we're getting it back into reality suddenly. Is it really so long? This is Hilary Mantel in her biography, right at the beginning of the book, her autobiography, which is called Giving Up the Ghost. And she's describing how she does see ghosts. And at the same time, she's talking about selling her old parents' house. They were years in which perhaps 500,000 words were drafted and redrafted. 7,500 meals were consumed. 10,000 painkillers, at a conservative estimate, were downed by me, and God knows how many by the people I'd given a pain. Years in which I got fatter and fatter, wider still and wider shall my bounds be set. And during 7 years of nights, dreams were dreamt, then erased or reformatted. They were years during which, on the eve of publication of my 7th novel, my stepfather died. All my memories of him are bound up with houses, dreams of houses, real or dream houses, with empty rooms waiting for occupation, with other people's stories and other people's claims, with fright and my adult denial that I was frightened. But affection takes strange forms after all. I can hardly bear to sell the cottage and leave him behind on the stairs. That's his ghost. Late in the afternoon, a migrainous sleep steals up on me. It plants on my forehead a clammy ogre's kiss. Don't worry, I say as the ogre sucks me into sleep. If the phone wakes, it will ring us. I knew the migraine was coming yesterday when I stood in a Norfolk fishmonger, choosing a treat for the cats. No, I said, cod's too expensive, and now to feed to fish, even fish like ours. So that's Hilary Mantel, quite typical section of writing which is in her memoir. Anyone that hasn't read her memoir, which is called Giving Up the Ghost, I urge you to read it because it's an absolutely phenomenal piece of writing describing how she became a writer, but also her life as she grew up and her life with other people, ghosts that she met and ghosts that she was haunted by, which is also described brilliantly in her novel Beyond Black, which we will be coming to soon. But I just want to read you a tiny bit more from her memoir because it's so much a discussion of being a writer. And I'm sure that lots of you that are with us here this evening are either writers or have a particular fascination in great writing, and you are obviously, I'm sure, also lovers of Hilary Mantel and her incredible writing, which sparks your brain in ways unlike any other writer I know, and which has the power, as described earlier, to bring physical presences into your room to make her characters so vivid that you actually believe that they are part of your own life. I hardly know how to write about myself. Any style you pick seems to unpick itself before a paragraph is done. I will just go for it, I think to myself. I'll hold out my hands and say, C'est moi, get used to it. I'll trust the reader. This is what I recommend to people who ask me how to get published. Trust your reader. Stop spoon feeding your reader. Stop patronizing your reader. Give your reader credit for being as smart as you at least, and stop being so bloody beguiling. You in the back row, will you turn off that charm? Plain words on plain paper. Remember that, Orwell says, that good prose is like a window pane. Concentrate on sharpening your memory and peeling your sensibility. Cut every page you write by at least 1/3. Stop constructing those piffling little similes of yours. Work out what it is you want to say. Then say it in the most direct and vigorous way you can. Eat meat, drink blood. Give up your social life and don't think you can have friends. Rise in the quiet hours of the night and prick your fingertips. And use the blood for ink. That will cure you of persiflage. But do I take my own advice? Not a bit. Persiflage is my nom de guerre. Don't use foreign expressions. It's elitist. I stray away from the beaten path of plain words into the meadows of extravagant simile. Angels, ogres, donut-shaped holes, which we were admiring earlier, I must say. And as for transparency, window panes undressed are a sign of poverty, aren't they? How about some nice net curtains? So I can look out, but you can't see in. How about shutters? Or a chaste Roman blind? Besides, window pane prose is no guarantee of truthfulness. Some deceptive sights are seen through glass, and the best liars tell lies in plain words. So now I come to write a memoir. I argue with myself. over every word. Is my writing clear, or is it deceptively clear? I tell myself, just say how you came to sell a house with a ghost in it. But this story can be told only once, and I need to get it right. Why does the act of writing generate so much anxiety? Margaret Atwood says, the written word is so much like evidence, like something that can be used against you. I used to think that autobiography was a form of weakness, and perhaps I still do. But I also think that if you're weak, it's childish to pretend to be strong. So that's Hilary Mantel in her fantastic memoir, Giving Up the Ghost, which I utterly urge you to read if you haven't yet read it. It's a brilliant, wonderful description of her early life, and also it's a book where you discover her interesting relationship with the afterlife, with the ghosts that she hung out with seemingly quite often. And talking of books by Hilary Mantel with ghosts, Beyond Black is probably my favourite of her novels, apart from the Wolf Hall trilogy, which I do adore. Um, Beyond Black is a book that was published in 2005, and sadly, I don't have a copy. I've only got it on Kindle, but I'd love to brandish it. It has a really great cover. It's all about a medium called Alison, who is an extremely large woman, but very fragrant. And she has a collection of ghosts who follow her around and are with her all the time. And they enable her to communicate with the public about their ghosts, their dead loved ones. And she's beset really by her terrible ghosts. And she has an assistant called Colette, who's very practical and can't see any of the ghosts at all and finds the whole idea quite irritating, but is a very brilliant assistant. And it's a very funny book. That's the other thing that people don't necessarily associate with Hilary Mantel, that she is incredibly funny. And Duchess of Nothing, thanks for joining me, says, yes, her earlier work is so brilliant as well. I totally agree. We should all go back immediately and read all her early novels because they're all brilliant. She really came into the writing world incredibly polished. I don't think she ever wrote anything bad, or if so, she managed to destroy it very quickly. So, Beyond Black, I'm going to read you a little bit from the novel Cure about it, which is the book that I wrote with Susan Elderkin, an A to Z of literary remedies. And we have as a cure for facing your demons Beyond Black. And I'm going to read to you why we feel that Beyond Black is a great cure for facing your demons. And also, it will tell you a bit more about the book. We've all got a few demons on our backs. Some of us live with them so successfully that we're able to forget all about them until one day we catch sight of one in the mirror and there's hell to pay. Some of us, however, live with our demons in plain sight, rolling their eyeballs like marbles as they follow us down the street. Luckily, our friends can't always see them. We maintain that all demons should be faced and vanquished and back to the hell from which they crawled out. To help you purge, we prescribe The Scourge of Beyond Black by Hilary Mantel, which, by the way, we call it a scourge in this book. It's a really funny book. I actually laughed out loud a lot through that book. Alison lives off her demons unwillingly. A charming, friendly psychic, she indulges in a vast amount of comfort food to keep her complex past safely smothered. For more, for more on psychological battles with weight, see obesity, sorry, that's a little reference within the novel Cure. After a demanding performance in front of an audience of hundreds on the outer edges of the M25, she wakes up in the early hours of the morning, craving sandwiches, donuts, pizzas. Alison's assistant, Colette, tries to put her boss on a diet, But this turns out to be as doomed as Alison's efforts to find out what really happened to her when the men that she still finds sprawled, semi-clad around her living room, having now passed into spirit, first took her to the shed to teach her a lesson as a little girl. The demons in her life really are extremely sinister. To bring this traumatic memory to the surface, Alison must quite literally confront them, led by her spirit guide, Morris, who is, by the way, absolutely disgusting and also very funny. Was her father one of these men, she wonders, and if so, which one? Alison first discovered her ability to communicate with spirit when, also as a girl, she was befriended by a little pink lady named Mrs. McGibbet in the attic, who faded back into the space behind the wall whenever her mother's heavy tread came up the stairs. Her powers don't come without pain. When I work with the tarot, I generally feel as if the top of my head has been taken off with a tin opener, she tells us. But little by little, we begin to understand the references to what the dogs ate in the woodshed and to what happened to the invisible Gloria, to whom Alison's mother speaks continually. The almost constant prickle of fear only disappears when the psychic meets her monsters head on. Alison's final epiphany is an act of supreme psychic redemption. Take heart from her triumph, shake that demon off your back, and look it in the eye at last. The process may not be painless, but you will, like Alison, find it less terrifying than you think. So that was from the novel Cure, in which we have Beyond Black as a cure for, well, as a means of really facing your demons. And I love Beyond Black. I love the character Alison. It is terrifically bleak, some people would say, but it's also very funny. And there is redemption within the book. I'll just read you a tiny section of it about Alison. Alison was a woman who seemed to fill a room even when she wasn't in it. She was of an unfeasible size, with plump, creamy shoulders, rounded calves, thighs and hips that overflowed her chair. She was soft as an Edwardian, opulent as a showgirl, and when she moved, you could hear, though she did not wear them, the rustle of plumes and silks. In a small space, she seemed to use up more than her share of oxygen. In return, her skin breathed out moist perfumes, like a giant tropical flower. When you came into a room she'd left, her bedroom, her hotel room, her dressing room backstage, you felt her as a presence, a trail. Alison had gone, but you would see a chemical mist of hairspray falling through the bright air. On the floor would be a line of talcum powder, and her scent, Je reviens, would linger in curtain fabric, in cushions, and in the weave of towels. When she headed for a spirit encounter, her path was charged, electric, and when her body was out on stage, her face, cheeks glowing, eyes alight, seemed to float still in the dressing room mirror. So that's from Beyond Black, the medium in that book, who is a particularly marvellous character who, if you haven't read, I would definitely suggest that you should read that book, Beyond Black. So I said at the beginning that I'd heard a couple of brilliant stories from authors and readers about Hilary Mantel. And one of the stories that came out was Monique Ruffy, who also put on Twitter that Hilary Mantel taught her how to write novels. So Monique Ruffy, who wrote The Mermaid of Black Conch, which is an absolutely fantastic novel, which I would urge everyone to read. And she won the Costa Book Award for it last year, I do believe, 21. She said, Hilary Mantel taught me how to write novels. In this essay, she handed over her method. I've shared it with countless students. Rest in peace and thank you, Hilary Mantel. So the essay that Monique Ruffy is talking about is called Growing a Tale, and it's in a collection called The Agony and the Ego and the Art and Strategy of Fiction Writing Explored. And that book, it's out of print, but because of Monique Roffey's tweet, it might come back. It stars authors such as Susan Hill, Faye Weldon, Graham Swift, Marina Warner, Patricia Highsmith, and of course Hilary Mantel. And in this essay, Hilary Mantel writes a lot of wonderful words of wisdom all about how to become a writer. And I will read you a little bit of it. You can find some sections of it online if you Google Hilary Mantel, The Agony and the Ego, The Art and Strategy of Fiction Writing Explored. So I'll just read you a little bit from it now, realizing that we don't have lots of time to talk about all of her incredible novels. When you begin the work on a book mentally, before anything goes down on paper, you have a lot of ideas. You may find a location that seems of interest, or a name might pop into your head, or a phrase. It's important to capture these insights. I carry small notebooks, which I can easily tear pages from, or I carry 3 by 5 inch index cards. I try to put down every insight, every glimpse of what this book will be, even if it is only a word. When I have a few of these cards, I pin them up on a cork notice board in the room where I work. You do not know at this stage what is important. That will emerge. You do not know the order of events, but you don't need to know. Ideas build around these glimpses, these key phrases. Perhaps I write something else on one of my cards, just a few words, or perhaps the original idea begins to develop, and I am moved to write a paragraph or two. I pin that paragraph behind the card to which it relates. The little words breed, sometimes several hundreds of offspring. I keep them on the board in any order until one day I see a sequence, a logic begin to emerge. Then I repin them, very approximately, very roughly, in the order in which I feel the narrative will take shape. A few weeks on, all these bits of paper, the original cards, and anything that's accumulated behind them go into a ring binder. With a ring binder, you can easily swap pages around. You're still not committing yourself to an order of events. You can add pages, transpose pages, but now you can begin to see how much of your book you've written, and so on. So this is Hilary Mantel describing her writing process, and I believe many writers have been inspired by this essay to actually go about it in the same way. And it makes sense. It's like creating a kind of collage of a book. I know lots of writers go in different directions when they're writing novels and probably don't use this method at all. But I can see how it's an incredibly helpful, brilliant, and useful method. And she goes on to say, I'm amazed at how easily ideas fall into place, how they multiply if you give them a chance, and if you don't close off their possibilities too early. This is really a method of growing a book rather than writing one. So Monique Roffey tweeted to the world that that is how she became a writer, because she read that essay by Hilary Mantel, which described her method. And that was how Monique Roffey started writing her own first book. So Hilary Mantel was incredibly generous to authors, and she was a great believer in helping other authors in the way that she sent out messages of positivity to people. And got one more instance of a lovely quote from an author who was deeply affected by Hilary Mantel and wrote about this moment when she died. So Stephen May, who is an excellent author and writer of fiction, and his most recent novel is Sell Us the Rope, tweeted on the day that Hilary Mantel passed away, very sadly. He said, short personal piece about a legend. I've had a handful of great days in writing. One of the very best was getting an email out of the blue from Hilary Mantel saying she loved my last book, which she'd read in proof form. So that would have been Sell Us the Rope, which is a historical novel set in the time of Stalin. Honestly, I nearly fainted over my laptop. Hilary had already influenced my writing, as she did so many others, and I was a fan. But she went out of her way to support me when she was really busy. She was writing a play and up against a deadline, but still read my novel thoroughly enough to make pertinent comments and suggestions. And I know she helped other writers whenever she could. We were due to finally meet in person a week ago at an event I was doing, and I was naturally disappointed when word came that she felt too under the weather to come along. No suggestion then that her illness was serious, and I'm sure this was because she didn't want to worry people or take the focus off our event. She was also due to start a new life in Ireland and was by no means finished creatively. There would have been more books, more plays, more essays, more stories. She had a lot more to say. She was a massive figure and someone who paid her dues. She was several books in, great books too, before the world really woke up to how good she was. And she had a chronic condition that meant she was in pain while she was working much of the time. She leaves a powerful legacy in her writing, but also she led an emblematic writer's life. I think I've lost my next page. Hold your horses. Sorry, Stephen May, cutting you off in mid-sentence. Just having a little quick rummage for that piece of paper. Page 8. Here we go. Do the work, focus on that, and help others when you can. I'll miss her, and I'll miss the books that we won't get. A final thing, we were both on the Costa novel shortlist at the same time once, 2013, and after the brief fuss was over and she'd been crowned winner, as was right and proper, I wrote to her to say it had been a mismatch. Mantel versus May. If it had been a boxing match, they wouldn't have allowed it. Life, Death, Prizes, which was Stephen May's book that was in the running up against Hilary Mantel, versus Bring Up the Bodies. Was, I said, like coming up against Ali in his prime. I think the comparison tickled her, though she didn't disagree. She knew her worth as a writer, but she was a force for good as a person too. World of the arts much poorer without her in it. I have to agree. And Breton Stripes is just commenting on Instagram. This is what's so sad. An amazing gift of a body of work, but so much anticipation over what she'd do next. I totally agree. She had so much more writing to come, and that is deeply tragic. You know, we do feel totally robbed. She was in her prime as a writer with so much more to say and so much more to give. So Stephen May, that was a really fantastic, lovely tribute to her. And he, of course, is being very humble about his own book, Life, Death, Prizes, which I have to say I love. Great, great novel. Do read it if you haven't yet discovered Stephen May, the writer. And he was one of the many authors who was very much influenced by the generosity of Hilary Mantel, as well as her incredible writing, which was so inspiring. So it's important to mention when talking about Hilary Mantel's very sad death that endometriosis, sorry, I'm not brilliant at pronouncing that, endometriosis, that's the one, is the disease that she very tragically died of and had for many, many years, and was undiagnosed for a very long time. And she is the person who knows about it far more than I do. And she did write an essay about it, which I'm just going to read a little bit from, because it is a very much misunderstood disease, and doctors still actually don't know why it happens or how to treat it. And of course, people are trying to find cures but have not yet succeeded. and it is a really awful condition to have. I'm just going to read you a little bit about that by Hilary Mantel herself. It was 1980 when I had surgery for endometriosis, and my case was extreme. But figures collected by the charities set up by and for sufferers suggest it still takes an average of 10 years or so for a woman to get a diagnosis. Endometriosis is a condition that is under-researched and poorly understood. We don't know for sure how or why it starts, but we understand something about its mechanism. The endometrium is the tissue that lines the womb, which is shed each month if there is no pregnancy. In endometriosis, those special cells are found elsewhere in the body, mainly in the pelvic area, though they can get just about anywhere. Each month, wherever they are, they obey their nature and bleed. The big three symptoms of which all GPs should be aware are painful menstruation, painful sex, and infertility. It is a peculiarity of endometriosis that the pain suffered isn't necessarily related to the visible extent of the disease. Many women are only diagnosed when they have difficulty conceiving. Early diagnosis is crucial. It must be treated and managed before permanent damage is done. The incidence of endometriosis in the population is hard to work out. Some suggest an incidence of 1 woman in 10. I find that figure implausible. This is Hilary Mantel speaking, by the way. Though I see that it would include women in whom silent disease causes no trouble. For every such woman, case histories amassed by the charities suggest that there are dozens who are routinely given the brush off by their doctors, who are told their pain is all in their minds, or who are dropped into the catch-all categories: ME, fibromyalgia, irritable bowel syndrome. All I can truly report is that the incidence of the disease is very high in the vicinity of me. 2 of my sisters-in-law received diagnoses of endometriosis in their 40s, which goes far to explain their ill health for many years. The knowledge, though, is not much comfort now. In an ideal world, a GP suspecting endometriosis would refer a patient to a gynecologist who would arrange a laparoscopy, which is a internal photography procedure, which can be done on a day-patient basis. Any endometriosis can be photographed, and sometimes it can be treated at the same time with laser surgery. So Hilary Mantel does write, I think it was in The Guardian, quite a long and very interesting article all about this condition that she had. And it is tragically unpredictable, capricious, tenacious. She calls it a destroyer of careers, families, and relationships, and it is worth more money and research effort. She says not only for what we could learn about the disease itself, but for the light that would be shed on infertility, immunology, and the connection between illness and psychological states. She says, when I had surgery, I was given the impression that I would recover in the same way as I would recover from a broken wrist. There might be the odd twinge in wet weather. Nothing and no one prepared me for the profound derangement of my body that disease and efforts at cure would bring. So it is a chronic condition which needs long-term emotional and physical support. Doctors grow impatient, families are disappointed, half-baked advice is plentiful. Aren't you better yet? Aren't you pregnant yet? They can do wonders these days, people tell you. But what seems crucial is for the sufferer to become informed and active in their own treatment. She says, no one will thank me for saying this, but I've often noticed that it doesn't seem to matter whether a woman goes in for yoga or Reiki or dancing or hot coals at the full moon. She starts to get better when she starts to take charge. She also says the mind-body link bears investigation. We need surer, swifter surgery and more targeted and tolerable drug therapy. Meanwhile, it is urgent that doctors, nurses, teachers know about endometriosis and act on their knowledge to spare young women years of pain, loss, and emotional damage. Though Breton Stripes is also commenting here that it's really interesting how writers like Sally Rooney and Johanna Hedman are writing about endometriosis. Thank you for that. I didn't know about that. And actually, if you can put down on the Instagram stream where they write about that, I would love to know. So perhaps it is becoming a condition which is now more known about and more hopefully beginning to be understood, or at least known as a condition. But poor Hilary Mantel suffered it for many years before she was diagnosed, and you can read about what happened to her in her fantastic memoir, Giving Up the Ghost, which describes many aspects of her life, particularly her young life when she didn't know that she had that, and also describes her very interesting relationship with her family and with some of the departed people in her family. Because, as I was saying earlier, Conversations with Friends, which I have read, but I didn't remember that that was in there. Thank you for that. So, yes, I was mentioning Hilary Mantel's really interesting relationship with ghosts, which is in many of her books because she does have this very fluid and fascinating relationship with history, which she describes in one of her interviews as being the element which we all swim through, but like fish, we don't recognize it as a reality. We're just used to it being there. And I think Hilary Mantel, more than almost anyone else that I've ever read, has this sense of history being all around us constantly, and the people from our past and the people that we have lost still being with us. So, on that note, this seems an appropriate moment to come to an end with this celebration of the life and work of Hilary Mantel. Her quote, "The past is so close and yet irretrievable," seems particularly pertinent this evening when we're thinking about her very sad passing. And I would like to share a toast, light a candle for Hilary Mantel if you can tonight. I feel like she is with us still, and her writing means that she will be with us forever. She's had an incredibly profound effect on hundreds and thousands of readers and writers, and she's going to stay with us forevermore because of that incredible writing. If you haven't read any of her books, I would urge you to start at the beginning and read them all. Definitely read Giving Up the Ghost, her fantastic memoir. Definitely read her incredible historical novels, Wolf Hall, Bring Up the Bodies, and The Mirror and the Light. But also read many of her 12 other fantastic novels, which are all absolutely brilliant and all show very different aspects of her incredible writing skill. So, thanks so much for joining me this evening. Let's all go and read lots of Hilary Mantel and light a candle for her this evening. And I will see you very soon. Good night. Thanks for coming and joining me.